Welcome to Hellish. I'm Daniel Whelan and I am Hell's receptionist. For my sins, I have been given an impossible task to process all of Hell's damned souls, making sure each and every one leaves Hell's waiting room with a suitably hellish job to do for all eternity. While they are here, I extract from them their infernal playlists, the 5 tracks they will meet in Hell. Helping out with the statistics and the biscuits is Satan's favoured T-boy and the person who created Sod's Law, Mr. Alex Gale. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. So everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Well,
this
not
was your
only
idea.
that everything can go wrong will go wrong. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time. That's the element I've added there.
Oh, okay. Why didn't you call it?
Law.
Why didn't you call it Alex's Law? I've got you there.
You've got me there, Dan. I'm not that imaginative or quick thinking.
Fair enough. I apologise for putting you on the spot. So, I see you have erected a shed in the corner of the waiting room this week. I assume you're going to produce a damned soul from this structure, are you?
I am indeed. This is the French-English writer Joanne Harris, OBE. Joanne is the author of 21 novels, 3 cookbooks, a musical, and countless short stories and novellas. Her third novel, Chocolat, was made into an Oscar-nominated film and is currently being developed into a TV series. Joanne is also a musician who's been in the same band since she was a teenager.
Joanne Harris, welcome to Hell.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I think it's my natural home, you know.
Oh, good. Most people don't like turning up in Hell, so it's quite nice to have an enthusiastic damned soul for once. That's quite nice. One thing I have to ask you, because I ask all of our guests this, what have you done to deserve this? Why have you ended up in Hell?
Oh, all writers are here.
Gosh, that's a sobering thought, isn't it? So we alluded to your shed just a minute ago, the shed that you've appeared from to come into the waiting room. Your shed is quite a popular thing, isn't it? The shed has even had its own calendar.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure the shed has more fans than I do. I started describing the shed when my husband had it built about 8 years ago, when Twitter was still Twitter, and I wasn't quite sure how to use it. And it acquired a kind of roving personality of its own, so it changes shape and aspect and location every day. And if I happen not to tweet the shed, then people have words with me and say, "Well, where's the shed? What are you doing? Are you in a
really?
Shed?" No. So yes, it's become a sort of writing ritual, I guess.
You don't regret that at all, because I can imagine some days you perhaps don't want to come up with something for the shed.
Oh, but I have to, really, because it's the way I get into the writing zone. It's my shortcut, if you like, and so it's actually very useful to me. It's a way of going, right, this is me grounding myself. This is where I am now. I get to work.
Okay, I have been reading your Doctor Who novella, which is called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Time Traveller, which I've been enjoying a lot.
I enjoyed writing that one.
You really have. It's a third Doctor John Pertwee era Doctor Who story, and I think you've really kind of captured that era of the show very well. I put it to you, Joanne, that your shed might well be a TARDIS. Is this possible?
It could be, or the TARDIS might well be a shed. Who knows?
The shed pre-exists the TARDIS even. Wow.
Which came first? Given the timey-wimey nature of both, they could very well both be coexisting in the same lost corner of the space-time continuum.
I think we've just added something to Doctor Who canon, so well done us. So, Joanne, I would like to ask you a little bit about your latest novel, The Moonlight Market, which I have also been enjoying a lot. It's part of a series of, I suppose, loosely connected series of work that is about kind of folklore, kind of fairy tales. Would that be right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how loosely they're connected, or in fact, how they are disconnected from anything else that I do, because pretty much everything that I do is in some way jump-started by folklore, fairy tale, the strong tradition of myth and legend that we all end up feeding from as authors in Europe. So, I mean, it's a standalone story, but it also fits in quite nicely with books like Honeycomb and Pocketful of Crows and things which all kind of exist in the same multiverse, if you like.
When I was reading that one, I was immediately struck by how it kind of feels like it's crying out to be made into a TV series. That book, it's kind of romantic and exciting, and it has this fascinating lore with it. Has there been any discussion about that possibility?
I don't know, not yet. I don't think so. I mean, usually I leave that to my film and media agent to deal with. And I don't usually pay much attention to things like that unless something concrete happens, because, she's always selling options to things, and then, nothing happens for 10 years and I get the thing back and I sell it to someone else. That's usually how it works. So I just write them and then I let other people do with them what they see fit. But yes, you're right. A lot of my stuff isn't particularly easy to adapt. That one would be, because it's very linear, and it's basically a love story. It's basically a version of Romeo and Juliet with angry fairies set in modern London.
What's not to like about that? So Alex alluded in the intro to this possible TV show of Chocolat, which is a novel that I think, certainly all the times that I've been listening to you and reading your interviews, this always comes up, is Chocolat, this great book. In fact, your Twitter handle is Joanne Chocolat, right? That it's a kind of integral to your kind of author history.
Well, I do have a very dull name, and I just had to keep explaining who I was to people by saying, the book you might have heard of is this one. So I thought eventually, I might as well just change my name and make it easier for people.
Fair enough. I remember there was Charlie Brooker used to have a website called TV Go Home, where he'd do kind of like satire of the Radio Times and like fake TV listings. And I remember one of the pieces in that book was a news item that Dan Aykroyd had officially changed his middle name to Ghostbusters, so he was Dan Ghostbusters.
I can relate that. Absolutely.
So I was wondering, because I read another. When you introduced yourself on Blue Sky, you gave us 10 things that we might not know about you, and one of them was that you don't like chocolate all that much.
Yeah,
I mean chocolate, the food stuff, not the novel. I wondered, although it's a great book and it is, it's always been very successful. Is there ever an element that it feels like an albatross around your neck, that this is the thing I always have to keep bringing up and I always have to keep talking about this book?
Well, I don't bring it up at all. Usually it's other people who bring it up. But I mean, I understand this because it's the thing that made the initial impact. It was my third book, but everybody assumed it was my first one because my other two had been largely unread by anybody. And I mean, in a way, it is what allowed me to have the confidence to write all my other books, and to bring them out into the world. So no, I don't feel resentful of it at all, but I am also not just that book. It is one of the bricks in something that I've been building ever since. And sometimes I'm slightly dismayed that people want to compare Chocolat to things that I wrote 25 years later, as if there had been nothing in between. For some readers, there hasn't been, of course, because readers read things at their own speeds and in all kinds of different ways. But I'm certainly not just the person who wrote that book.
I always find that with that artists always seem to have an interesting relationship to a big success, that some artists will kind of shy away from it. I think you see this in music quite a lot, that a band that has a big hit will maybe not play it. Like Radiohead don't do Creep anymore, for example. And so I always find that interesting, how people react to their big success. So speaking of music, you're also a musician yourself.
Well, in a sense, yes. I mean, I've been playing music since I was a kid, and I very quickly learned bass when I was 16 so that I could join a band, because I'd fallen in love with the drummer and they didn't have a bass player. And for some reason, I'm still there playing in the band and doing different things, and ended up marrying the drummer.
Wow.
I was going to ask, yeah, that's pretty cool. What a rhythm section.
Well, quite. Well, as the show kind of progressed and became Storytime, became what we do now, which is much more of a theatrical kind of live show, and I ended up doing a lot more upfront things than I thought I was going to. I ended up sort of conceding that perhaps we needed another bass player so that I could do all the other things. So we've had a series of Spinal Tap-like experiences with bass players who haven't really stayed.
But our folk serve the winter king. To none are we beholden. We are the humble and the poor. We live in heath and heather. Our castle is the windy moor. Our crown the black rose feather. But on All Hallows Eve we'll go a-roving and make merry. And you'll be queen of Fiddler's Green and I'll be king of Fairy.
So I've been listening to a little bit of the Storytime Band, Joanne, because you have it on Bandcamp. You have, would you say an album, maybe a mini album?
Well, there are two things. Yes, there's a sort of little taster album with some story songs on it, and then there's something a little bit longer, which is a kind of long piece based on my little novella Pocket Full of Crows, which is some narrative and then a number of pieces of music interspersing it. So basically, Jack and Ori with drums.
That's great. It's kind of like, I would describe it as prog folk, which I really like. It reminded me a little bit of Steel Eye Span, but it's also definitely got that kind of like proggy kind of Rick Wakeman kind of, even a little bit like War of the Worlds in a way, that you have this kind of narrator all the way through.
Yeah, I think you've nailed our influences there. When I was 16 and we played our first gig at the sixth form college that we were all at, my boyfriend, our best friend Paul, and the classics teacher who was the bass player in those days.
Wow.
I think most of our set was Rick Wakeman. It was incredibly ambitious, audacious set. We played half of Six Wives of Henry VIII, and then half of Genesis Duke, and then half of Pink Floyd's The Wall. And everybody sat there like angels and drank orange squash and clapped at the end. It was very, very peculiar.
Wow, that is quite something. It beats doing stereophonics numbers, which is what Alex and I used to do when we were at school.
It's a little more ambitious than us, Dan.
Yeah, it's quite something to start with. So Joanne, as you know, you're going to be here with us while our Inhuman Resources department finds you something unbearable to do for the rest of your afterlife. While you wait...
Editing. You could
editing.
Editing. It's what I've been doing unbearably for the last, it feels like about 500 years already, and I'm still not quite finished. So, I could give you some pointers in that direction.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely put that on the list. Tracy from HR will definitely be finding you something edity to do. But so while you wait for Tracy to come back to us, we'll be creating an infernal playlist for you. So Tracy wants to know what the worst job you have ever done is, just so that she can add that to the mix when she's thinking of something horrible.
Oh, well, the worst job I ever did, I was an accountant for a year. For purely financial reasons. I took the first job I could with a degree. I didn't tell them I had dyscalculia, which means I literally can't process numbers. And I hated it. I was tremendously bad at it. Everybody else hated me. And I hated them too, because all they talked about was squash and money. So it was possibly the worst environment I could possibly have been in. I kept on with it for a year and then failed all my exams and they booted me out. So yeah, that's definitely the worst.
Okay, well we'll add that to the mix of editing as well. Is there anything else bad about being a writer that we should perhaps consider? Anything else that you don't like about the job you do now?
Well, I'm giving you ideas here, but I have to say I've never particularly enjoyed the level of scrutiny that comes with being a writer. I think, being a writer to me is quite a private, personal thing. And then, of course, you realise that you've put all your private, personal ideas out there and people then want to talk about them. And it's quite difficult. I've never been especially good at talking about myself. And particularly, the scrutiny that comes with a big book or a book that's associated with a film, that's always very tough. When Chocolat came out, I went through a whole year of having what I now realise were panic attacks, where I would just pass out in particularly glitzy environments. So several royal palaces, several movie premieres, just pass out like Tony Soprano and end up on the floor. I realised later that was me trying to process the level of scrutiny that was happening at that time.
That sounds quite intense. Was it a very worrying time for you?
It was marvelous in many ways, but it was also very worrying. Yes, it was a destabilizing time, and every time I thought I was getting used to what was happening, something else would happen that I would have to get used to, and so it took a while. I think my brain was just buffering over that year, and eventually it all kind of settled in.
Do you still get that kind of level of scrutiny now? Do you get kind of crazy fans writing to you about the various colours that you picked for Chocolat or something like that? Does anything like that happen?
Well, I have fans writing to me about all kinds of things, and that doesn't bother me at all because most of them are, just wanting to share things that have resonated with them. I've had a couple of stalkers, which has been uncomfortable. And of course, nowadays, everything you say on social media gets pulled out and weaponized because we are in a time of culture war and everything has to be controversial somehow.
But you are a very I don't want to say prolific tweeter, but you are very active on social media. If you feel like that, is there not the temptation to just go, well, screw it, I'm not going to be part of this machine, this thing that is kind of building outrage and wants to willfully misinterpret me all the time?
Well, that's why I left Twitter. That's why I'm now on Blue Sky and Threads instead, because Twitter became a kind of awful mechanism for spreading hate, and I realised that just being there was probably not a great idea, and so I've kept my account open, but I don't really use it. I think it's a bit of a pity because in many ways, I mean, I'm still a fan of social media as a means of communication, as a way of bringing people together. But, when it is being deliberately used to bring absolutely the wrong sort of people together to do the wrong sort of things, then I think people should step away.
I kind of feel like the golden era of social media might have already passed. That now it seems to be so turned towards driving engagement and basically to monetize yourself. Whereas in the past it was kind of like more organic. That it'd be like, oh, I've seen Joanne has retweeted this thing, and then I get to learn about that person, and then that person becomes part of my kind of circle, and it kind of felt more social than it is now.
I think you're absolutely right. I think I'm still optimistic about Blue Sky, which doesn't have one of those aggressive algorithms. But yeah, I think, it could well be that the time of social media has passed and that, we have to find something else.
No, it would be a nicer world. I was thinking this, I was listening to someone talking about reading a newspaper, and that's not something I often do. And it goes a little broader than social media. I don't want to sound like a Luddite, but when I go on a newspaper website, I see a selection of stories that they've perhaps picked for me to see based on what I visited previously. Whereas if I open a newspaper at a cafe and I've got an hour to spare, I can read all manner of different things and learn about so many different things. So it feels like we're so closed in now, just with digital technology.
I think so. And I think a lot of this is about AI. I feel that a lot of screen time now is sifting through things that AI have decided I should read, that AI has written, that AI is commenting on, that AI has illustrated. And I think, okay, I'm really not interested in any of this. I've always felt that communication with actual people was the important thing. I think that we should be looking at analog things. And I find a lot of young people are.
There was a thing in The Guardian this weekend about how Gen Z have adopted bookshops as like physical bookshops, going in, browsing, talking to people, which is kind of heartwarming. I love the idea that bookshops might be making a comeback as a community hub.
I do hope so. I think Gen Z are very underrated by my generation. I think there are an awful lot of people of my age complaining terribly about young people, but actually it seems to me that it's an intelligent, articulate generation that see perhaps further than we did.
We can only hope, right? I mean, it feels like when I was growing up, there was a generation above me that thought we were the end of the world, and it will probably happen to this
I
generation
think
as well.
Plato had the same problem with the youth, so it's probably something that every generation has.
Evergreen problem.
It's inherent. Okay, so speaking of youth, let's get on to your Infernal playlist. And we like to start with a track that you used to like or that you own that you are now embarrassed by. So what's...
Well, it's not quite that I'm embarrassed, because I'm never really embarrassed by pleasures. But I look back and I think, yes, I was a certain person when I was obsessed with this track. And it is the Seekers' Morning Town Ride, which I loved when I was about 8 and was slightly obsessed with.
Right, well, let's have a little listen. Here we go.
Rockin', rollin', riding out along the bay, all bound for Morningtown, many miles away.
Okay, Alex, let's hear a little bit about Morningtown Ride by the Seekers, please.
Well, it was initially written and recorded as a lullaby in 1957 by the American folk singer Malvina Reynolds, and the Seekers, who were an Australian folk pop group, covered it in '66, and this single got to number 2 in the UK charts. They first recorded the song in 1964 for the amusing or badly titled, depending on your point of view, album Hide and Seekers LP. It had backing from Bobby Richards' orchestra, but then 2 years later they re-recorded it with Tom, older brother of Dusty Springfield, producing.
Oh.
And the Seekers shouldn't be confused with the group The New Seekers, who were formed by David Potcher of The Seekers after the band's breakup in '69. The New Seekers achieved worldwide success in the early '70s with a number of hits, including I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing. And they were even given their own TV show, which, again, was rather amusingly or terribly titled Finders Seekers.
Okay, I wonder if you started a band and called it the New Seekers. Could you get away with that? Do you think that somebody would be coming after you?
That moment might have passed. I think you'd have to have at least one seeker in there, and I'm not sure there are any of them left.
No. Well, maybe there's a new seeker. There might be one new seeker, or the child of a new seeker that we could make.
Perhaps you could have a tribute band with some appropriately comedic name.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Well, they probably would think of something based on those puns that Alex was giving us. So, tell us about when you're 8 years old and you first discover Morningtown Ride.
Well, actually, I got this via one of my school teachers who at junior school used to occasionally, if we were very good, bring a guitar into the class on Friday afternoons and play. And we thought this was marvellous. And I became, because I didn't have a record player, I became slightly fixated by this song, which she sang very often. And when I did eventually get a record player, I realised that there was a record of it and I bought it. So it was the first thing I bought, long before, in fact, I had anything to play it on. And I've still got it, and I've still not got a record player.
Really?
Now, my husband has got one in his shed somewhere, but I still don't have one. So I have a small pile of records that I can't actually play on anything.
Has the Seekers record ever been played?
Oh, I think it's probably been played somewhere.
It's a very lovely, gentle song, this, I found. It isn't really about anything other than the surface level of comparing going to bed with going on a train. There's something about it, though, that it made me feel a bit Christmassy. It kind of feels like maybe it could have been a Christmas song. I don't know why that is. There's something, maybe it's to do with like children going to sleep and a kind of certain magic that maybe winter brings.
It could be. I think it's a fairy tale. In the right kind of mood, I still enjoy it, but it is very simple and very syrupy and just a wee bit emotionally predictable. And I got onto rather darker music quite early in life.
So what did you move on to after? What followed the Seekers then in that case?
Well, it took me a long time to really know anything much about contemporary music because my parents didn't play that kind of music. My mother only played French singers from her generation, and so I was kind of brought up on people like Georges Brassens and Jacques Brel and this kind of thing. And then when I was 16 and I discovered, suddenly I was alerted to the existence of prog because I suddenly found myself in a prog band without knowing anything about it. And so I was given a kind of long list of homework of things I ought to listen to. And so that was really my awakening into something new.
So when you hear this fantastic new prog music, one of the things I always think about prog is that it's quite hard to initially get into it. You have to work a little bit because often the time signatures are a little bit funky. They're not your standard 4 to the floor. They're often about quite esoteric or interesting things. It is a little bit of hard work to get into it. Was this a situation of like, well, I really fancy this drummer. I'm gonna really put the hours in, because I have been in a situation where I fancied someone and pretended to like Meatloaf, for example. So I wonder, was that an extra incentive?
I mean, it was my incentive to find out about it, but I found that I liked the music because you did have to work with it, and you had to listen to it for a while before you properly understood how it worked. And to me, everything that I heard on the radio seemed so catchy and three-chordsy that I thought, oh, well, pop music is just very simplistic. It's all earworms. And then I realized that actually there was this other area of music that I didn't know much about, which had a huge amount of theatre in it, which was classically inspired, which had themes, which had narratives. You know, there was a lot to unpack there, and I liked that. It made me curious.
Have you seen the film, what's it called, Dan? Is it called A Mighty Wind?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the folk music Spinal Tap.
Christopher Guest. It's like a folk music Spinal Tap, yeah. And I found it a little difficult to listen to this song with a straight face and think of that film at the same time. It feels like I find it hard to imagine people going to see a new Seekers gig or a Seekers gig and thinking, this is cool. It's just... I
think you have to be very, very mellow.
Yeah, I think so. Quite mellow.
Well, it was quite a mellow time, wasn't it? The 60s.
It was. I think everybody was feeling quite mellow at that time. So you could get things under the door that you probably couldn't anymore.
No. I find that actually with a lot of music from the 60s is that even like early Beatles records, that they kind of don't stand up anymore because pop music as a form has come so far from, you know, Hard Day's Night or something that's a period piece, whereas some of the later Beatles records and some of the later 60s records still, I think, stand up.
Well, I think a lot of that was to do with the arrangements.
Yes.
And some of the later arrangements were so intensely well thought out that, you know, the fact that the music was fairly simple didn't really impact. It just it gave it a sort of a heart and a sophistication that it wouldn't have had otherwise, which is why you've got this shift. And the instrumentation too changed a lot.
I suppose like being able to record more than 4 tracks probably helps as well. That when you can get to
sure that helps.
8 tracks and things like that too. The technology
it has come on a bit, Dan, hasn't it?
It has, a little bit, just a little bit. So track 2, Joanne, on your Infernal playlist is a song that is universally adored that you cannot stand. So what is this?
Well, seeing was around the subject of the Beatles, and I do like the Beatles. This one's Hey Jude, which I've never met anybody who disliked it, and yet somehow I do.
Okay, let's just in case someone hasn't heard it, let's hear a little bit of Hey Jude. Okay, Alex, can you tell us anything about Hey Jude that the world doesn't already know?
No.
Okay.
It was released in 1968 by the Beatles as a non-album single written by Paul McCartney. Became a #1 hit around the world, including 9 weeks at the top of the American Billboard 100. It was nominated for 3 Grammys in 1969. In 2004, Rolling Stone placed it at #8 on their list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. And in 2001, it came in at 3rd on British TV Channel 4's list of the 100 greatest singles. It is so popular, in 2020, a handwritten copy of the lyrics to the song used during recording and gifted to an engineer sold at auction for nearly $1 million.
Wow. Okay, so $1 million song, Joanne. What's your problem with Hey Jude?
Well, I mean, I think it's massively overplayed.
Yep.
And it's also about 2 minutes too long.
I would
Absolutely.
3 or 4.
I think the fade out is just interminable.
I timed it today. The na 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 na's bit is sort of, was that 4.5 minutes of na 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 na,
Yeah,
with Paul
absolutely.
McCartney freaking out over the top of it. The fade is a minute long at the end of it.
It really is. It becomes, yes, it becomes slightly unbearable. And also, I mean, I do, I'm in hell already, so what can you do to me? But I do think that Paul McCartney's lyrics are quite weak.
Yes.
And this one is probably among the weakest. And I've always had a sensitivity to lyrics and have needed a song to say something to me. And this one is just mostly na na na, which is probably why I don't rate it as highly as a lot of people do.
I think that maybe there might be a parallel universe somewhere where the Beatles are still recording Hey Jude now, going na 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 na. They're trapped in like a time loop.
That fade out.
Yeah, they're still doing the time loop. The song is it's very easy to understand what this song is about. It's about an older man talking to a younger man, giving him kind of romantic advice. That's kind of roughly what happens. And all the way through, I have with me the Beatles illustrated lyrics. All the way through it, you kind of can understand what I'm talking about. Very simple. Don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. And then you get near towards the end, and he says that the older man says to this younger person, "Don't you know that it's just you? Hey Jude, you'll do," which is terrible advice. It's like, don't you know it's just you? Like, everyone else is fine. It's just you that has this problem, Jude.
Yeah, I mean, if we deconstructed this advice lyric by lyric, I'm not sure what that poor young man would come away from. Because play her better music.
Yeah.
Let her get under your skin, and remember it's all about you. Doesn't seem to me the best solution to whatever romantic problems he was experiencing.
No.
All that said, though, it is a nice story that he wrote this for Julian Lennon, who was going through an awful time because his dad was such a selfish prick and had buggered off to New York with a new lady, or even around London, and poor Julian was stuck up. And I know exactly where he was stuck. He was stuck in the town of Ruthin in North Wales, on the same street my parents currently live on today, which is a beautiful, lovely place to be. But North Wales can be wet and grey and miserable. And this was sort of, cheer up, Julian. It'll be all right. That's quite nice, isn't it, Dan?
Well, I mean, it's a nice intention and execution are not always the same thing, Alex.
No, that's very true.
It is also, funnily enough, the second song we've had on Hellish that was written by one rock star about another rock star's son. Because we also had Little James by Oasis, which was written for Jim Kerr from Simple Minds' his son. So that's an interesting Hellish fact.
Yeah. Factoid.
Okay, so this brings us nicely to the end of part one. Listeners, if you are Patreon subscribers, then you are about to hear who the artist Joanne Harris will meet in hell is. If you're not yet, then why not join? Head to patreon.com/hellishpod for longer, ad-free episodes of your favourite hell-based podcast. And if that hasn't convinced you, then we hope you enjoy the adverts coming up after this brief musical sting. Hello everyone. Sorry to interrupt the episode. Well, I'm not sorry really. I just wanted to let you know about a few ways you can keep us on the road to hell. The first is nice and cheap. Like, subscribe, follow, award us 5 stars, write a review, tell all your friends and enemies. We're at HellishPod on social media, apart from Instagram where we are hellish_pod. The more visible the podcast is, the more episodes we'll be able to make. The second is if you want to tip us, you can go to coffee.com/hellishpod to throw us a few coins, either just because you're nice or because you want to try bribing your way out of hell. That's coffee.com/hellishpod, ko-fi.com/hellishpod. We workshop that name ourselves in hell just to make it very awkward for all podcasters who are asking for tips. The last one is to subscribe to our Patreon. You'll get longer, ad-free episodes. You'll get access to our 2 pilots. Plus, there's a bunch of other bonus stuff for higher tiers, including the chance to make a cameo appearance on a future episode. That's at patreon.com/hellishpod. Now, back to Hellish. Welcome back to Hellish, where we are asking writer Joanne Harris for the 5 tracks she will meet in hell. We like to start part 2 with something particularly devilish. And so, Joanne, we would like a track that reminds you of a hard time in your life. So what's this?
Well, this is actually a track I like, but it does remind me of hard times in my life, and this is Open Door by Genesis.
Okay, let's have a quick listen.
Oh, if you count the stars, you'll know how many have gone out. And when the master calls for me again, there's nothing that I can say or I can do.
Okay, Alex, what have you got for us about Open Door?
Well, it was the B-side of the single Duchess, which was the second single from the 1980 Genesis album Duke. It was composed by Mike Rutherford of the band and recorded during the Duke recording sessions, but it never made it onto the album. The single itself, it didn't really bother the charts. It only got as high as number 46 in the UK, but the album fared much better. Got to number 1 and received generally positive reviews.
Okay, so Joanne, tell us about this hard time in your life that this song recalls. What happened?
Well, I seem to come back to it every time I go through a hard time. It's one of those intensely melancholy songs that I find, in a weird way, quite comforting. I first discovered it was on a playlist that my boyfriend made for me when people still did tape mixers. When I went to university, and we went to universities in completely different parts of the country. And I find it quite hard to be away from home, and so it was one of my homesickness tracks, and I would play it in my rather depressing little student room, and wish I was somewhere else.
It's a very lovely piece of music. I hadn't heard it before you bringing it to us, and I can absolutely see why it would. It's got an element of homesickness to it, doesn't it? It's quite oblique, though. I find it quite hard to understand exactly what it's about. It's more of a feeling.
I think so. I think it's, depending on where you play it and what context you play it in, it can be either about missing people or about bereavement or just about feeling disconnected generally. It's not a particularly well-known song, but I like it partly for that. It never gets played on the radio.
No.
So it never comes up unexpectedly when I'm... Because that's unfortunate, isn't it, when that happens?
Yeah,
very true. You mentioned, Joanne, home being important to you, and when you went away to university, both of you were far from home. Where, without being specific, have you ended up back at home, as home was from the beginning, or have you found a new home somewhere in the world?
Well, I've realised that actually home is where you build it, and so home is where the people you love happen to be, and you can make a home. It's not necessarily just about geography. It's mostly about people and feeling that you belong somewhere.
That's a lovely thought. I think it's quite easy to forget that sometimes. Especially if you have people spread out in lots of different places. It's quite easy to yearn for something else, I think. Well, we're going to move on now onto track 4, which is a track you hate by an artist you love. So what's this one?
Yeah. This is Kate Bush, Sat in Your Lap, and you can probably guess why I hate it.
Let's play it and we'll talk about it. Here we go.
I see the people happy, so can it happen for me? 'Cause when I am unhappy, there's nothing that can move me.
Some say that knowledge is something that you never have. Some say that knowledge is something sat in your lap. Some say that heaven is hell. Some say that hell is heaven.
Okay, Alex, what have you got about Sat in Your Lap, please?
Well, it was released in 1981, and it was the first single from Kate Bush's 4th studio album, The Dreaming. It climbed as high as number 11 on the UK Top 40 and stayed on the singles chart for a total of 7 weeks. This song is much more percussive than Kate Bush's earlier material, and the song features drums and percussion recorded in the Stone Room at the Townhouse Studio in London, a room most famous for being the place that captured the drum sound on Phil Collins's In the Air Tonight. Du-dum, 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 du-dum. That one.
Alex is a drummer, everyone, so
Yeah.
that's just proved it. Okay, so Joanne, let's start with your love of Kate Bush before we get into Sat in Your Lap. So how did Kate Bush come into your life, and what does she mean to you?
I've liked her since I was in my mid-teens, when I first heard her on the radio, and when Wuthering Heights came out. I remember thinking how striking it was and how different and how musically innovative it was. I basically stopped liking her music as much after about Lionheart. So The Dreaming is when my questioning of her direction started. But this particular song, I think, was the epitome of everything I didn't like about her new direction. And also, I've always had a little bit of trouble with her lyrics, and particularly with the grammar of her lyrics.
So I have...
And this one is a very wonderful example, and I'm sure it's supposed to be, but it didn't do it for me.
I also have the Kate Bush lyric book here, with Sat in Your Lap. The thing that on the inside flap of the Kate Bush lyric book has a quote from the Irish Times, which says, "There's not a spare word anywhere in Bush's work. Everything means something." And while I like Kate Bush, the thing that sometimes bothers me about her is that I worry that I'm just too stupid.
You're not clever enough, are you?
Yeah,
that's it.
that it is about something, but I'm just an idiot. And I feel that about Sat in Your Lap. That I can't really quite get what it is that it is supposed to be about.
I don't know much, as we've established on this podcast previously. I don't know much about Kate Bush, and I know a couple of the hits. But if someone asked me to imagine a Kate Bush song, this is the song I would imagine.
Oh,
in my mind, she's just rattling out sort of really weird, pretentious art music with, bamboo sticks swinging through the air to make sound effects and all this kind of stuff. But I'm told she's not. She's much better than that.
I think one of the problems with her, and I've always had this ambivalence, is that she tries to do an awful lot of things at once and does some of them better than others. What she does extremely well when she does it is sit down and write a song on the piano.
Yes.
And sometimes her lyrics are good and sometimes they're not. And to me, really the benchmark for a good lyric is if you can come away from the song feeling something or knowing something apart from, this is obviously a very clever person. I think in some cases you come away thinking, what the hell was all that about? Which is probably not what she was going for.
That's definitely the true with Sat in Your Lap, I would say. That it's quite hard to get a handle on what it is supposed to be about. I kind of get roughly that maybe it's something to do with how people wanting something for not having to work for it, maybe. I don't know. It's quite hard to get into, and I like her. I really like Kate Bush, but I sometimes struggle with that. Just the possibility that I'm an idiot.
I think that's it, Dan. I got this song straight away. I heard it once.
Did you?
I understood it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And you're not going to share though.
No.
Okay, fair enough. We wouldn't want the hoi polloi to understand what it was about. Fair enough. So, Joanne, we have almost reached the end of our quest. The Stonecutter Demons are busy chiselling your first 4 tracks into an unbreakable iPod-shaped amulet, and they require one final song, an earworm. So, what is a track? Which one's stuck in your head you can never get out?
Well, this is a bit strange, really, because you probably think, why am I even listening to this stuff?
Right.
But my kid got me into K-pop a few years ago, and I started to use it when I was on my running playlists, and I discovered that there is an artist that I can't listen to anymore at all because everything she sings is the most terrible earworm, and I can't get rid of it. And that is Kiari Piamu Piamu, and she has a particular song called Pon Pon Pon, which is the most terrible earworm. I just can't listen to any of her stuff anymore now.
Okay, well, we're about to infect you, so here we go. So, Alex, what can you tell us about Pon Pon Pon?
Pon Pon Pon, all uppercase, was released in 2011. It's the debut single by Kyte Photography. It was written by Yasutaka. Oh, I knew it. I read this so many times thinking, just say it like it's written. But no, it was written by Yasutaka Nakata, who is a Japanese music producer and DJ. And the song, as well as its music video, became an international sensation, even got to #1 in Finland. And the video has over 200 million views. The lady, who is Kyte Photography's real name, is Kiru. Oh God, I'm so terrible at Japanese names. Kiriku Takemura. She's from Tokyo, and she began her career as a model and a fashion blogger before turning to music in 2011. She's since been described as a J-pop princess and Japan's Lady Gaga. In 2016, Japan's Seibu Railway honoured her by running a train at the Seibu Ikebukuro line from June to September, themed on the pop star's music videos.
Wow. That
They
must
are
be
wonderful videos, I have to say.
It's absolutely amazing.
Fascinating.
It's like the phrase "on acid" is used far too much to describe creative things that are like a little bit wacky. But her videos, that works 100%.
They are quite fascinating and worth braving the earworm for. But,
It is incredibly catchy, this song. I really quite like it. Like, it isn't the kind
I
of
like
thing
it
that
too. I just can't hear it.
It's hypnotic. It's trance-inducing. It's superb.
It makes me think of, because I was a teenage 16-bit video game player. I was very into Super Nintendo, and whenever I listen to this, it makes me think of, I've just completed Mario Kart on 150cc, and they're going around the track, and Donkey Kong is pumping his arms, and it just really made me happy to hear this song. I thought,
Yeah, she's very much. She has made herself into her own animated creation.
So that sounds like Tracy from HR has your work placement, Joanne. So while I go and decipher the ancient incantation, Alex, can you recap Joanne's Infernal playlist, please?
I can indeed. Track #1, a track Joanne is embarrassed that she used to like, is Morningtown Ride by The Seekers. A track that is universally adored that Joanne cannot stand, Hey Jude by The Beatles. A track that brings back bad memories, Open Door by Genesis. #4 on the playlist, a track that Joanne hates by an artist she loves, Sat in Your Lap by Kate Bush. And track #5, a track once stuck in Joanne's head that she can never get out, is Pon 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 by Kyte Photography. Joanne, which of the 5 songs would you least like to hear on high rotation? So which is the most hellish of your hellish songs?
Oh, I think it has to be Sat in Your Lap. For the grammar alone.
Right.
If not for the drum sound, which is just egregious, but yeah.
Okay, we will put that on the highest rotation, and we'll also play you out with Sat in Your Lap as well.
Curses.
So I have deciphered what Tracy has to say, and she has a interesting task for you. So she considered putting you in accountancy, because we do have a whole circle of hell dedicated to accountancy, but she's found you something much nicer. What we have here, we have a whole department that uses AI to generate novels. And what we would like you to do, Joanne, is to go through and edit them. So you won't have any creative input, you'll just be doing the editing. The hard grind of it will be your job. I hope that's okay.
Oh, that will be absolutely terrible. Thank you.
Excellent. And Tracy will be pleased to hear that you do not like that. So your cursed iPod has passed quality control, and it will now be put around your neck, never to be removed. Before you make your journey into your special corner of hell, is there anything you want to tell the listeners about? Maybe books coming out or anything like that?
Well, my new book, The Moonlight Market, is still around. It would be lovely if people bought their loved ones a copy for Christmas. And Maiden, Mother, Crone, which is the big omnibus edition of my 3 novellas plus some new stuff, is just out in paperback. So there's that one too.
Excellent.
Perfect timing.
just in time for Christmas. I'll also remind our listeners that our former damned soul, Bonnie Hawkins, is the illustrator of the stories in Maiden, Mother, Crone.
She is indeed, and very beautiful they are too.
Yes, she's a fantastic artist, really quite something. So, Joanne, that is it for your Infernal playlist. We now have to tell you to go to hell.
It hasn't been the first time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hellish was written and presented by me, Daniel Whelan, and Hell's quickest improviser of Sod's Law-based banter, Alex Gale. You can support the show on patreon.com/hellishpod. Find us on social media at hellishpod, apart from Instagram where it's hellish_pod. You can listen to all of Joanne's choices and our ongoing Ultimate Infernal playlist, bringing everyone's choices together at hellishpod on Spotify. Until next time, damn you all to hell.